Grandma declared, college for them. Yours? YouTube for learning. My son then asked, so Grandma thinks I'm a joke? I quietly moved their money from one account. Next morning, Mom texted, bank says we have no access. Then the crying, begging, panicked calls started. Could you ever imagine a world where your own parents, your grandparents, look at your children and declare them not worth investing in? Because that nightmare became my reality, and it led me to do something I never thought possible. I locked them out of their entire life savings. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon, the kind of mundane day that shatters in an instant. I was just folding laundry, the familiar scent of fabric softener filling our cozy living room, while my son, Ethan, bravely stumbled through a Mozart piece on the piano next door. Then my phone rang, and Eleanor's voice on the other end was like a cold gust of wind, carrying news that would freeze my blood. Your father and I have made a decision about the education funds, she announced. No warm hello, no gentle lead-in, just blunt business. We're establishing college accounts for Chloe and Noah. They're excellent students, and Jessica really needs the help. I stopped mid-fold, my husband David's work shirt still clutched in my hands. I remember thinking, that's generous. But then the words came out. What about Ethan and Harper? The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could practically hear Eleanor taking a deliberate sip of her afternoon tea. We've discussed this extensively. Jessica's children show more academic promise. Your kids can find alternatives. There are scholarships, community colleges. People learn everything on YouTube these days. YouTube? The words landed like individual slaps across my face. I sank onto the arm of the couch, the shirt slipping from my grasp. You're telling me you're funding my sister's children's education, but not mine, because you think they're smarter? Don't twist our words, she snapped, her tone icy. We have limited resources, and we need to invest them wisely. Chloe is already reading 2 grades above her level. Noah has been identified as gifted. Your children are fine, but they're average. We can't afford to split the money 4 ways when 2 of them would benefit more. Just then, Ethan hit the final chord of his Mozart piece. Slightly off-key, earnest, hopeful. My 13-year-old boy, braces on his teeth, still growing into his feet, who loved astronomy and spent hours devouring documentaries about space exploration. My 10-year-old daughter, Harper, obsessed with marine biology, her room plastered with hand-drawn jellyfish. Average? They're not average, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor sighed, full of impatient exasperation. They're your grandchildren. This is exactly the kind of emotional response I expected. We're trying to be practical. Perhaps if you'd push them harder academically instead of letting them pursue these hobbies, we'd feel differently. Her voice hardened. But the decision is final. We're meeting with our financial advisor next week to set up the accounts for Chloe and Noah. Then she hung up before I could even draw a breath. I sat there, the dead phone still in my hand, staring at the wall where Ethan's school photos hung in chronological order. Each year, the same crooked smile, the same hopeful eyes. In the kitchen, I could hear Harper narrating her math homework aloud, just as she always did. My children. Average. David came home 2 hours later to find me at the kitchen table, laptop open, staring blankly at banking statements. He kissed the top of my head. What's wrong? I told him everything. Every word. His jaw tightened with each sentence, his face growing paler. He let me finish, then pulled out the chair next to me and sat down with a thud. So, your parents are playing favorites with our children's futures, he said, his voice flat with disbelief. Because Jessica's kids test better on standardized assessments. As if we're not paying the same mortgage, the same bills. As if our kids don't deserve the same opportunities. He reached over, gently closing the laptop. We'll figure it out. We've been saving since they were born. It won't be easy, but we'll make it work. Your parents don't get to determine our children's worth. But the anger didn't fade. It solidified in my chest, a cold, heavy stone. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's face if he ever found out his grandmother thought he was ordinary. Or Harper discovering her passion for sea creatures was somehow less valuable than her cousin's reading level. Dinner was quiet that night. Ethan chattered about his science project on planetary rotation. Harper described a YouTube video about bioluminescent organisms she wanted to recreate as a diorama. They were bright, curious, utterly oblivious that their own grandparents had already written them off. After they were asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and reopened the laptop. The banking statements glowed in the dim kitchen light. Eleanor and Arthur had always been comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. My father, Arthur, had worked in insurance for 40 years. Eleanor had taught elementary school. They owned their house outright, had pensions, Social Security, investments. 3 years ago, after Arthur had a health scare, they'd asked me to help them reorganize their finances. I'd spent weeks working with their advisor, consolidating accounts, updating beneficiaries, setting up power of attorney documents. Eleanor had even insisted I be added to their primary savings account as a joint holder for emergency access. Just in case, she'd said, "You're so much better with these things than Jessica." I pulled up that account now. The balance sat there in bold numbers. $287,000. Money accumulated over decades, meant for their retirement and, eventually, to be split between Jessica and me. The same money they were now planning to divide unequally in the next generation, rewarding some grandchildren while dismissing others. My finger hovered over the keyboard. Joint account holder. Equal access. Equal rights. I'd never touched their money. Never even considered it. But I'd also never imagined they would treat my children as lesser. I closed the laptop and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. The next day was worse. Ethan came home from school subdued, tossing his backpack on the floor instead of hanging it up. I found him in his room an hour later, lying on his bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars we'd stuck to his ceiling when he was 8. "Rough day?" I asked, my heart aching. He shrugged without looking at me. "Grandma called during lunch." Everything inside me went still. "She called your cell phone?" "Yeah. She wanted to tell me about the college fund they're setting up for Chloe and Noah. Said she was excited because they're doing so well in school. She said, maybe I could learn a trade instead of going to college, like plumbing or electrical work. Said, there's no shame in working with your hands." I walked over and sat on the edge of his bed, my breath catching in my throat. "What did you say?" I said, "Okay," and hung up. He finally turned his head to look at me, and his eyes were wet, glistening. "Am I not smart enough for college? Is that what she thinks?" "No, baby. You're brilliant. Your grandmother is wrong." "Then why would she say that? Why would she give them money but not me?" His voice cracked. "Does she think I'm a joke?" The stone in my chest didn't just crack. Open, it shattered. Rage poured through me, hot and vicious. She'd called my child directly. Told him to his face he wasn't worth the investment. Made him question his own intelligence, his own value. "She's wrong," I repeated, my voice steady through sheer force of will. "And I'm going to handle this." I kissed his forehead and left the room before he could see the tears stinging my own eyes. In my own bedroom, I locked the door and called Eleanor. She answered on the third ring, sounding annoyingly cheerful. "Did you call Ethan today?" I asked, skipping any greeting. "Oh yes. I thought it would be good to talk to him about realistic expectations. Better he knows now than gets his hopes up unnecessarily. You told my 13-year-old son that he should learn a trade because he's not smart enough for college. I said there's no shame in trade work, and there isn't. Not everyone is cut out for university, sweetheart. Ethan is a nice boy, but he's not going to be an academic star. Better he understands that now." He asked me if his grandmother thinks he's a joke. A pause. "I never said that. You implied it. You told him you're funding his cousin's education, but not his, because they're smarter. What else is he supposed to think?" This is exactly the kind of dramatic overreaction I anticipated. We're trying to help the family by investing wisely. If you can't see that, I can't help you. "Stay away from my children," I said, my voice low and hard, each word a hammer blow. "Don't call them. Don't text them. If you can't treat them with respect, you don't get access to them. You're being ridiculous. We're their grandparents. Then act like it." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat on the bed and stared at nothing, Ethan's question echoing in my head. Does she think I'm a joke? That evening, after the kids were asleep, I opened the laptop again. The joint account stared back at me. I thought about Ethan's tear-streaked face. About Harper, who would inevitably hear the same message eventually. About Jessica's kids being told they were special, while mine were told they were ordinary. Eleanor had made me a joint account holder for emergencies. She trusted me with access because I was responsible, reliable, good with financial matters. She'd never imagined I might use that access against her. I logged into the account management system and navigated to the Signature Authority section. As a joint holder, I could modify access parameters. With 3 clicks, I removed Eleanor and Arthur as primary account holders and established myself as the sole owner. The money didn't move, but the control shifted entirely. They could no longer access, transfer, or even view the account without my permission. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time before closing the laptop. Then I poured another glass of wine and waited. The text came at 7 the next morning. It was from Eleanor. Why did the bank say we have 0 access to our savings account? Call me immediately. I was making breakfast when my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. A 3rd time. I turned the ringer off and handed Harper her orange juice. By the time I dropped the kids at school, I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages. Eleanor's messages grew increasingly frantic. This isn't funny. We need access to our money. Call us now. Arthur's prescription refill is due and we can't access our account. What have you done? Call us. Jessica called during my drive to work. I answered on speaker. What did you do to Mom and Dad's account? Good morning to you too, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. They're panicking. They called the bank and were told the account ownership was changed. The bank said someone with Signature Authority modified it yesterday. That was you, wasn't it? I exercised my rights as a joint account holder. Are you insane? That's their retirement money. You can't just take it. I didn't take anything. The money is exactly where it's always been. I just changed who controls access to it. Why would you do this? What's wrong with you? I pulled into the parking lot at my office and put the car in park. Eleanor called Ethan yesterday. Told him he should learn a trade instead of going to college because he's not smart enough for university. She told my 13-year-old son that she's funding your children's education, but not his, because they're more worthwhile investments. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, she didn't say it like that. She absolutely said it like that. And now Ethan thinks his grandmother considers him a failure. So, I'm done pretending this is normal family dynamics. You can't hold their money hostage. That's financial abuse. It's financial leverage. There's a difference. They wanted to make decisions about investing in the next generation. I'm making decisions about protecting mine. They'll never forgive you for this. They should never have made my son cry. Jessica hung up. I sat in my car for a few minutes, watching people walk into the office building. My phone continued buzzing with messages. I turned it off completely and went to work. The calls came to my office line instead. My assistant stopped by my desk around 10 with an apologetic expression. Your mother has called 6 times. She says it's an emergency. It's not, I said. Please tell her I'll call when I'm available. She's crying. She sounds really upset. I looked up from my computer. She made my son cry yesterday. I'll call when I'm ready. My assistant backed away slowly, eyes wide. I returned to the budget spreadsheet, though the numbers blurred. My chest felt tight, but underneath the guilt was still that cold, hard anger. They'd hurt my child. Called him directly to tell him he wasn't good enough. And now they were crying because I'd taken away their ability to reward that cruelty with money meant for the whole family. Arthur called David's cell phone that afternoon. I only found out when David texted me, your dad says they can't access their account to pay bills. Says they're going to lose their house. What's going on? I called him during my lunch break. They're not going to lose their house. They're being dramatic. Babe, I need you to explain what happened. I told him everything. About Eleanor's call to Ethan, about the account I'd been added to years ago, about changing the access permissions. He was quiet for a long time. You locked them out of their own retirement account. I locked them out of an account they were planning to use to hurt our children. Yes, this is going to escalate. It already escalated when Eleanor told our son he wasn't worth the investment. More silence. Then he sighed. What's your endgame here? What do you want to happen? I stared out my office window at the parking lot below. I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want them to understand that they don't get to treat our children as less valuable than Jessica's. I want an apology and a promise that it stops. And if they don't, then they learn to live on their pension and Social Security like millions of other retirees. You know this is nuclear, right? This is burning bridges nuclear. They lit the match first. That evening, my voicemail was full. I listened to them while making dinner, my phone on speaker on the counter. Eleanor's voice progressed from angry to pleading to hysterical. Arthur sounded tired and defeated. Jessica left a message calling me vindictive and cruel. My aunt called to say she was disappointed in me. The messages from Jessica were particularly venomous. In the third one, her voice dripped with contempt. You've always been jealous that my kids are smarter. This is just you being petty because Chloe got into the gifted program and Ethan didn't. Grow up and give mom and dad their money back before I call a lawyer. I saved that message. Something told me I might need it later. Around 7, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see Jessica standing on my porch, arms crossed, face flushed with anger. I debated not answering, then decided avoidance would only delay the inevitable. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the hallway. Alone. David appeared from the living room, took one look at Jessica's expression, and quietly disappeared upstairs with the kids. I heard their bedroom door close, then the muffled sound of a movie starting. Jessica whirled on me the moment we were alone. What is wrong with you? Mom is having panic attacks. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. You're killing them over hurt feelings. I'm protecting my children from being treated like second-class family members, I replied, my voice even. There's a difference. Chloe and Noah are exceptional students. The money would go further with them. That's just reality. You can't punish mom and dad for being practical. Practical. I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. Is that what we're calling it when you tell a child they're not worth investing in? Jessica's joy tightened. Ethan is a decent kid, but he's not going to Harvard. Neither is Harper. They're average students with average futures. Chloe is already being recruited by private schools. Noah scored in the 99th percentile on every standardized test he's taken. The return on investment is completely different. The clinical way she discussed my children made my stomach churn. Return on investment? You're talking about 9 and 13-year-old kids, Jessica, not stocks. I'm talking about reality. Mom and dad have limited resources. They're trying to make smart choices about where that money goes. You're just bitter because for once in your life, you're not the favorite. There was a sting of truth in that last part. Growing up, I'd been the golden child, better grades, more awards, never in trouble. Jessica had struggled academically, socially, in every way that mattered to our parents. She'd spent our entire childhood being compared to me and always coming up short. This isn't about me, I said quietly, firmly. This is about Ethan asking if his grandmother thinks he's a joke. This is about my children being explicitly told they're less valuable than yours. They're less academically talented. That's not an insult. It's an observation. Not everyone can be exceptional. Someone has to be ordinary. Get out of my house. Jessica blinked, surprised by my flat tone. What? Get out. Now. Before I say something we can't come back from. You're being ridiculous. Mom and dad need their money. They have bills to pay, medications to buy. You're holding their financial security hostage because your kid got his feelings hurt. Ethan didn't just get his feelings hurt. He came home and cried in his room for an hour. He asked me if he was smart enough for anything. A 13-year-old boy questioning his entire intellectual capacity because his grandmother called him to say he should learn to fix toilets instead of pursuing an education. And you're standing here defending that. I'm defending practical financial planning. Then go plan your finances somewhere else. We're done here. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, her expression hardening. Fine. But when mom and dad lose their house because they can't pay the mortgage, that's on you. When dad can't afford his heart medication, that's on you. I hope your pride is worth it. They're not going to lose their house, I said. They have pension income and Social Security. They'll be fine. just less comfortable than they're used to being. You don't know that. You don't know what their expenses are. Actually, I do. I helped them reorganize their finances 3 years ago, remember? I know exactly what they spend each month. They can cover their necessities without that savings account. They just can't fund Chloe and Noah's college funds while ignoring Ethan and Harper. Jessica's face went pale. So, this is punishment. Pure punishment. No, this is consequences. There's a difference. Ethan wandered into the kitchen while I was chopping vegetables later that evening. Grandma keeps calling my phone. I haven't answered. That's fine. You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to talk to. Is something wrong? She left a voicemail crying. I set down the knife. Grandma and I are having a disagreement about how families should treat each other. It's not your fault, and you don't need to worry about it. Is it because of what she said to me? I pulled him into a hug. It's because you deserve better. Both you and your sister. He hugged me back, still skinny and awkward in the way of young teenagers. I don't want you to fight because of me. I'm fighting because I love you. There's a difference. My phone rang again. This time it was Arthur's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Your mother is in the emergency room, he said without preamble, his voice strained, frightened. She had chest pains. They're running tests. Everything inside me went cold. Is she okay? They don't know yet. Could be her heart. Could be anxiety. But she's terrified. And she keeps crying about the account, about not being able to pay for treatment if it's serious. Please, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Give us access back so she can stop worrying about money while they're trying to figure out if she's having a heart attack. Ethan pulled away from the hug, his eyes wide. I turned away so he couldn't see my face. Which hospital? St. Mary's. But you don't need to come. Just restore the account access. That's all she's asking for. I closed my eyes. The guilt pressed down like a physical weight. But underneath it, cold and unmovable, was the memory of Ethan's face when he'd asked if his grandmother thought he was a joke. I'll think about it, I said. Let me know what the tests show. You'll think about it? Arthur's voice rose, cracking with disbelief. Your mother is in the hospital, and you'll think about it? The account has $287,000 in it, Dad. If she needs treatment, that money isn't going anywhere. I'm not going to let her go without medical care. But I'm also not going to cave to emotional manipulation before we've had a real conversation about what she did to Ethan. Emotional manipulation. Your mother is genuinely ill. This stress is killing her. Then maybe she shouldn't have created the stress by telling her grandson he's not worth investing in. Silence. Then, quietly, I can't believe you're this cold. I learned from the best. Call me when you know what's actually wrong with her. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. Ethan was staring at me from across the kitchen. Is Grandma okay? He asked, his voice small. She's at the hospital. They're checking her out. She'll be fine. Because of me? Because of what I said about her calling me. I walked over and gripped his shoulders. No, this is not because of you. This is because adults sometimes create messes and then can't handle the consequences. None of this is your fault. Do you understand me? He nodded, but his eyes were wet. I pulled him back into a hug and let him cry against my shoulder while guilt and anger warred in my chest. 2 hours later, Arthur called back. It was an anxiety attack, not her heart. They were keeping her overnight for observation, but she was going to be fine. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by fresh anger. An anxiety attack. Yes. Brought on by the stress of the situation. The stress you created. The stress she created when she decided to play favorites with her grandchildren. I'm glad she's okay, Dad. Genuinely. But this doesn't change what needs to happen. She needs to apologize to Ethan. You both need to commit to treating all 4 grandchildren equally. Until that happens, the account stays as it is. She could have died tonight. But she didn't. She had an anxiety attack because for the first time in her life, she's facing real consequences for hurting someone. I'm sorry it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. He hung up without responding. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. David found me there 20 minutes later, tears streaming down my face. What happened? He asked, pulling me close. I told him everything. About Jessica's visit, about Eleanor's hospital trip, about Arthur's accusation of coldness. He just held me while I cried, not saying anything, just present. Am I wrong? I finally asked. Should I have just given them access back when Dad called from the hospital? I don't know, he said honestly. But I know Ethan heard his grandmother tell him he wasn't good enough. I know that broke something in him. And I know that if we let this go without forcing real change, it'll happen again. Maybe not the same way, but they'll keep treating our kids as less than. So no, I don't think you're wrong, but I think you're paying a hell of a price for being right. Is it worth it? He pulled back to look at me. Ask me again after they apologize to our son. Ask me again when Ethan stops questioning whether he's smart enough. Then I'll tell you if it was worth it. Harper came in then, holding her tablet. Why is Aunt Jessica texting me asking if I know what you did to Grandma? Because adults sometimes handle things badly, I said. Delete the message. She shouldn't be dragging you into this. What did you do? I'm having a disagreement with your grandparents about fairness and family. Is this about the college money? Harper asked, too perceptive for 10. I heard Ethan talking to Dad about it last night. I looked at David, who had just walked in. He shrugged helplessly. I sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for both kids to join me. Your grandparents decided to establish college funds for your cousins, but not for you. They said it was because Chloe and Noah are better students. When your brother asked Grandma about it, she told him he should learn a trade instead of going to college. She hurt his feelings badly. Harper's face crumbled. They think we're not smart. They're wrong, I said firmly. You're both brilliant in your own ways. And I'm addressing the situation so they understand they can't treat you this way. How are you addressing it? Ethan asked. In a way that makes them pay attention. That's all you need to know right now. Dinner was quieter than usual. Afterward, I finally listened to Eleanor's most recent voicemail. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Please call me back. We can't pay our bills. Arthur needs his medication. I don't understand what we did to deserve this. Please, honey, please call me back. I deleted it. Then I called my financial advisor instead. I need to establish education trusts for 2 minors, fully funded, protected assets. Can we set up a meeting? Of course. How much are we talking about? 200,000, split evenly. That's quite generous. And the source of the funds? Savings. I'll have it transferred over before the end of the week. After I hung up, David came into our bedroom and closed the door. You're taking their money and using it for the kids' college funds. I'm reallocating family resources to their intended purpose. Just more fairly distributed. They'll never let this go. You know that. Then they'll spend the rest of their lives living with the consequences of trying to hurt our children. He sat on the bed, running his hands through his hair. Part of me thinks this is crazy, but the other part thinks about Ethan's face when he came home from school yesterday, and I want to do a lot worse than take money out of an account. So, we're on the same page. We're on the same page, but babe, this is going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. By Friday, Eleanor and Arthur showed up at my office. Security called to ask if I wanted to see them. I considered saying no, then decided it was time to face this directly. They looked terrible. Eleanor's eyes were swollen from crying. Arthur seemed to have aged 5 years in 5 days. They sat across from me in the small conference room I'd reserved, and for a moment, nobody spoke. You need to restore our access to that account, Arthur said finally, his voice steady but strained. This has gone far enough, has it? I asked, my voice calm. Because from where I'm sitting, it only started going far enough when I took action. We didn't do anything to warrant this kind of retaliation, Eleanor said, her hands shaking. We made a financial decision about our own money. You had no right to lock us out. You made me a joint holder on that account 3 years ago. You gave me that right. For emergencies. Arthur snapped. Not for theft. I haven't stolen anything. Every penny is exactly where you left it. You just can't access it without my permission now. Consider it an emergency fund for my children's emotional well-being. Eleanor started crying again. How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this. Did you? I leaned forward. Because the woman who raised me wouldn't have called her grandson to tell him he's not smart enough for college. She wouldn't have told her daughter that her children are worthless investments. So maybe I learned cruelty from watching you. We never said they were worthless. Arthur protested. You said they were average. You said they should learn from YouTube instead of going to university. You told Ethan to consider trade school because he's not academically gifted enough to deserve the same support as his cousins. Do you understand what that did to him? He came home and asked me if his grandmother thinks he's a joke. Eleanor's face went pale. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? Explain to me how telling a 13-year-old child he's not worth investing in could possibly be interpreted kindly. Silence. Arthur cleared his throat. We thought we were being practical. Chloe and Noah are exceptional students. We wanted to maximize the impact of our investment by minimizing my children. By making them feel less than. You didn't intend to hurt anyone, but you did. And you did it deliberately, with full awareness. Mom even called Ethan directly to make sure he understood his place in the family hierarchy. Eleanor covered her face with her hands. I thought it would help him adjust his expectations, save him disappointment later. Instead, you disappointed him now. You made him question his own intelligence and value. And you made me question whether you ever actually loved my children as much as Jessica's. Of course we do, Arthur said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then prove it. Apologize to Ethan. Apologize to Harper. Acknowledge that what you did was hurtful and wrong. Commit to treating all 4 grandchildren equally going forward. And then you restore our access? Eleanor asked. Then we'll discuss next steps. They looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Arthur stood up. We need to talk privately. We'll call you tonight. Take your time, I said. I'm not going anywhere. But neither is that money until we resolve this properly. They left without saying goodbye. I sat in the conference room for a long time afterward, staring at the table. My hands were shaking. I just threatened my parents, leveraged their financial security to force an apology for my children. Part of me felt sick, but the larger part felt righteous and unmovable. The call came at 8 that evening. Arthur's voice was formal. Careful. We'd like to come over tomorrow to speak with Ethan and Harper, if that's acceptable to you. It is. What time? 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll be here. He hung up without saying anything else. I told David, and we agreed to let the kids know in the morning so they wouldn't spend all night anxious. Saturday morning arrived, cold and gray. Ethan and Harper sat on the couch in their pajamas, confused about why their grandparents were coming over so early. When the doorbell rang, I could see Ethan tense up. Eleanor and Arthur came in looking exhausted. Eleanor had clearly been crying more. They sat in the armchairs across from the kids, and for a moment, the silence was suffocating. Ethan, Harper, Arthur began, his voice rough with emotion. We owe you both an apology. We said and did things this week that were hurtful and wrong. We made you feel like you weren't as important or valuable as your cousins, and that was cruel. Eleanor took over, tears streaming down her face. I called you, Ethan, and said terrible things about your future. I made you question whether you were smart enough for college. I was wrong. You're both brilliant children, and we love you so much. I'm so sorry we made you feel otherwise. Ethan stared at his hands. Why did you say those things if you didn't mean them? Because we were thinking about money instead of people, Arthur said. We got focused on finances and investments and forgot that we were talking about our grandchildren. About you. And that was unforgivable. Are you still going to give Chloe and Noah college money, but not us? Harper asked, her voice small. My parents looked at me. I kept my expression neutral. Eleanor swallowed hard. No. If we establish college funds, it will be for all 4 of you equally. That's how it should have been from the beginning. Do you really think we're smart? Ethan asked. Yes, Arthur said firmly. You're fascinated by space and science. You teach yourself complex concepts from documentaries. That's intelligence, Ethan. Real intelligence, not just test scores. Eleanor turned to Harper. And you're going to be a marine biologist someday. I see how you study those creatures. How you remember every detail. That's brilliance, sweetheart. Harper started crying, her little face crumpling. Ethan's eyes were wet. Eleanor moved to sit between them on the couch, pulling them both into a tight hug. I'm so sorry. Grandma was so wrong. You're both perfect exactly as you are. I watched from the doorway, my throat tight. David stood beside me, his hand finding mine. After a while, the kids went upstairs. My parents stood slowly, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What happens now?" Arthur asked. "Now you follow through," I said. "You treat all 4 grandchildren equally. You stop playing favorites. You rebuild the trust you broke." "And the account?" Eleanor asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. With a few taps, I restored their primary access. "It's yours again. But understand something. If you ever hurt my children like this again, I won't just lock you out of an account. I'll lock you out of our lives completely. They come first. Always." Arthur nodded slowly. "We understand, and we'll do better. I promise you that." They left shortly after. I stood at the window watching them walk to their car, both moving like they'd aged decades. David came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You think they meant it?" he asked. "Time will tell. But at least now they know there are consequences for treating our children as less than." "You really would have kept that money, wouldn't you?" Without hesitation. Ethan and Harper deserved better. If locking their grandparents out of their own account was what it took to make them see that, then it was worth it. He kissed my temple. "Remind me never to cross you. Just treat our kids right, and we'll never have a problem." Upstairs, I could hear Ethan playing piano again. Different piece this time, something he was composing himself. It was rough and unpolished, but uniquely his. Through the wall, I could hear Harper explaining octopus anatomy to her stuffed animal in elaborate detail. They sounded happy, light, like children should sound. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Mom told me what happened. I can't believe you went that far." I typed back, "I can't believe I had to. If your children had been the ones dismissed, you'd have done the same." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response came. A week later, Eleanor and Arthur called to say they'd met with their financial advisor. They were establishing equal college funds for all 4 grandchildren. The amount was smaller than what they'd originally planned for Chloe and Noah alone, but it was fair. That was what mattered. Ethan's next report card came home with straight B's and 1A in science. He showed it to me proudly, and I put it on the refrigerator next to Harper's drawing of a giant squid. That evening, Eleanor called to ask if she could take the kids for ice cream that weekend. Her voice was tentative, hopeful. "Let me ask them," I said. Ethan and Harper talked it over and agreed. Saturday afternoon, my parents picked them up and brought them to the ice cream shop downtown. When they came home 3 hours later, both kids were smiling. Ethan had a new astronomy book Arthur had bought him. Harper had a stuffed octopus from Eleanor. "Did you have fun?" I asked. "Grandma said she's sorry again," Harper reported, like 3 times. "And Grandpa said he wants to come to my science fair next month. He asked about my solar system project too. He actually seemed interested," Ethan added. They ran upstairs to play with their new things, leaving me alone with my parents in the foyer. Eleanor's eyes were still sad, but there was something steadier in her expression now. "Thank you for giving us another chance," she said quietly. "Don't thank me. Thank Ethan and Harper. They're the ones who decided to forgive you. We won't mess this up again. I promise." "See that you don't." They left, and I went to find David in the kitchen. He was unloading the dishwasher, humming under his breath. "So," he said without looking up, "did playing hardball work?" "Time will tell, but I think they finally understand the stakes." "No regrets about how far you took it?" I thought about Ethan crying in his room. About Harper's face when she'd learned her grandparents thought she wasn't smart enough. About the weeks of silence and anger and fear. "Not a single one," I said. "Some bridges are worth burning if it means protecting your children. And some people need to lose everything before they understand what they actually value." He pulled me close. "You're terrifying sometimes, you know that? Only to the people who hurt my family." Upstairs, Ethan started playing piano again. Different piece this time, something he was composing himself. It was rough and unpolished, but uniquely his. Through the wall, I could hear Harper explaining octopus anatomy to her stuffed animal in elaborate detail. My phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor. "Thank you for not giving up on us. We'll prove we deserve this second chance." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to David. We stood in the kitchen, listening to our children being children, messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. Eventually, I texted back, just love them. All of them equally. That's all I've ever wanted. The response came quickly. We will. I promise. Love you, sweetheart. I set the phone down and raised my glass. David clinked his against it. What are we toasting to? Nuclear options, I said. May we never need them, but may we never hesitate to use them when our children's well-being is at stake. To nuclear options, he echoed, and to knowing when to holster the weapon. We drank. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the lawn. Everything felt fragile still, but possible, like something broken that might actually heal if everyone was careful enough. Ethan's music drifted through the house, filling the spaces between words. And for the first time in weeks, the weight in my chest felt lighter. Not gone, but manageable. Like maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to being a family again. But I kept the banking app on my phone, just in case. Some lessons needed permanent reminders. This whole situation was a whirlwind of emotions. I'm still processing what it means for my family moving forward. If you found yourself in my shoes, facing this kind of blatant favoritism and emotional damage to your kids, what would your next step be? Did I go too far, or was I completely justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading everything.